The cow belt and beef politics. Indian politics, in all its manifestations, continues to both amaze and appall. The latest example of both lies in a uniquely Indian phenomenon, one which has begun to flourish under the current government: cow vigilantism. Many Orthodox Hindus, particularly in the northern Indian states irreverently dubbed the cow belt, not only do not eat beef, but worship the cow as Gamata, the mother of all, a provider of nourishment and sustenance. Several Indian states have passed laws outlawing cow slaughter. Some go farther and neither permit the possession nor the consumption of beef. These are, for the most part, barely enforced. The police have better things to do than to check people's kitchens. But following the BJP's victory in the 2014 elections, a wave of Hindu triumphalism has swept India. In its wake have come new laws to protect cows and vociferous demands for their strict enforcement. Gaurakshak or cow protection societies have been revived, and many have taken it upon themselves to compel compliance. In the process, not only have they taken the law into their own hands, but they have perpetrated grave crimes, including murder, in the name of the cow. 70 cases of cow-related violence have been reported in the last 8 years, of which 97%, or 68 out of 70, have occurred during the 3 years of BJP rule, and a majority of these have occurred in BJP-ruled states. 136 people have been injured in these attacks and 28 killed. 86% of the victims were, of course, Muslim. 29. Many of the incidents are well known. The case of a dairy farmer, Palakan, transporting cattle legally with a license, being beaten to death on April 1, 2017 while his tormentors filmed his pleas for mercy on their mobile phones, is particularly egregious. A cattle herder in Haryana, Mustain Abbas, was murdered and mutilated a year earlier for doing his job, herding cattle. Truckers, cattle traders, and alleged cow smugglers have also been killed by cow protection groups. A 16-year-old Kashmiri Muslim boy was murdered for having hitched a ride on a truck that was transporting cattle. In 2015, when a Muslim, Mohammed Akhlaq, father of a serving Indian Air Force serviceman, was lynched by a mob in Uttar Pradesh on suspicions of having killed a cow, the authorities launched a forensic investigation into whether the meat in his refrigerator was beef. It was not. The fact that the man had been killed and his son nearly beaten to death was equated with an unfounded allegation of beef consumption, as if the latter crime could extenuate the former. Worse, when a man who was part of the lynch mob died of natural causes a few weeks later, his coffin was draped with the Indian flag, and a serving union minister who attended his funeral hailed him an unspeakable act, and coming from a high office holder of the secular Indian state, an unacceptable one. Muslims have not been the only targets of the cow vigilantes. In addition, the lynch mobs have linked their cause to another staple of Indian society: violence against Dalits. Many Dalits still make a living performing tasks that other Hindus are unwilling to take on. Upper caste Hindus may worship the cow, but cows, alas, are not immortal, and when they die, ideally of natural causes, their carcasses need to be disposed of. This task has traditionally been left to Dalits, who for centuries and more have skinned the animal to sell its hide to tanners and leather makers, disposed of its meat to Muslim butchers in the few states where it is legal, and buried or cremated the rest. It is a distasteful task to many caste Hindus, and most are happy to let willing Dalits do it. In turn, dead cows have become a source of livelihood for many Dalits and Muslims. But several recent incidents have shaken the foundations of this arrangement. 4 Dalit youths caught skinning a cow were stripped, tied, and beaten with iron rods in the state of Gujarat by cow vigilantes who accused them of killing the animal they had not. 32 Dalit women were assaulted in BJP-ruled Madhya Pradesh for carrying cow meat, which turned out, upon inspection, to be buffalo meat and therefore not illegal. 31. Such incidents have heightened the sense of vulnerability felt by many who do not necessarily share the reverence the vigilantes feel for cows. Yet, for the first time, India has a central government that refuses to disapprove of cow vigilantism. The Minister for Social Justice, whose principal responsibility is to promote the welfare of India's Dalits, regretted not the vigilantes' violence but the fact that they had perpetrated it on the basis of ill-founded rumors. 32 In other words, their mission was so transcendently just that their misbehavior could be condoned if their targets really had killed or eaten a cow. The atmosphere of cow fundamentalism enforced by the vigilantes has caused immense economic complications. Many farmers look after their cows with respect, but once they are too old to produce milk, they find it unaffordable to maintain them and quietly sell their cows to butchers, or to those who could transport them across state lines to states where cows could legally be slaughtered. With this option now foreclosed in the present climate, many farmers are being driven into debt by the expense of maintaining unproductive and uneconomic cattle. And the country's population of cows is proving increasingly unsustainable. 33. It is not a coincidence that 63% of atrocities against Dalits because of cow vigilantism occur in just 4 states: UP, Bihar, MP, and Rajasthan, in order of magnitude. The rise of Hindu chauvinism, unchecked by government, has given rein to assorted petty bigotries. There are signs of an incipient Dalit backlash against the injustice of being obliged to do unpleasant work to make a living and then being assaulted for doing it. After the Gujarat incident, one group of Dalits in the state has flatly refused to continue with its traditional profession of disposing of dead cows. If the cow is your mother, they ask upper caste Hindus, why don't you bury her? The irony is that, as a commentator on the Dharmashastras points out, though the cow was sacred in Vedic times, it was this that allowed for beef to be consumed. 34 There are references in the Rig Veda, in the Dharmashastric literature, the Taittiriya Brahmana, verily, the cow is food, and the Vahasani Samhita that support the contention of beef being eaten at the time. 35 The historian D. Anja has pointed out dozens of examples to prove that the Rig Veda is full of allusions to the slaughter and consumption of cows. Ancient lawgivers, Manu included, appear to grant sanction for the slaughter and consumption of cow meat. The great sage and lawgiver Yajnavalkya, of the Upanishads, is quoted as saying, on the subject of whether beef should be eaten, I, for one, eat it, provided that it is tender. 36. Ambedkar theorized that the worship of the cow emerged from the struggle between Buddhism and Brahmanism, by making the cow a sacred animal and beef eating a sacrilege. He argued, Brahmanism sought to establish its supremacy over Buddhism. Be that as it may, the ruling dispensation's relentless drive to promote its ideology of Hindutva has latched onto the cow as its current instrument of choice. Cow protection has become the facade for a broader agenda, and is being resisted precisely for that reason. There is no doubt about the veneration of the cow across India, and the respect for it as a source of milk and nourishment for all and, after its death, of meat and nourishment for some. Calls during the Constituent Assembly deliberations to ban cow slaughter, opposed by a vocal minority, were finally reduced to a directive principle anchored in economics and not religion. Article 48 of the Constitution says that the state shall endeavor to organize agriculture and animal husbandry on modern and scientific lines and shall, in particular, take steps for preserving and improving the breeds, and prohibiting the slaughter of cows and calves and other milch and draft cattle. So this endeavor, stopping well short of a ban, was related specifically to the needs of agriculture and animal husbandry, not of worship. Mahatma Gandhi himself said that though he did not eat meat and was personally opposed to cow slaughter, in a multi-religious country like India he could not justify imposing his Hindu views on the many who did not share his faith. Many Hindus feel the same way. I am vegetarian myself, and abhor the idea of consuming the corpses of animals, but I do not judge those who, for cultural or other personal reasons, do so. I only ask that animals be treated decently and without cruelty, and that even their slaughter, for purposes of consumption, be conducted humanely and with minimal pain and suffering for the poor creatures. The furor that accompanied the new Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, Regulation of Livestock Markets, Rules, 2016, rolled out by the Ministry of Environmental Affairs in Delhi, polarized opinion across the country, especially in beef-eating states like Kerala. There it produced a strong reaction from an indignant chief minister, invited condemnation across the local political spectrum, forced the state to drag the center to court, united warring student union factions to organize beef festivals across the state, and even gave Twitizens a field day with hashtag Pomon Modi, Go Away Modi, used last when the PM compared Kerala to the African nation of Somalia, resurfacing as a popular hashtag. 37. Though the new rules do not directly impose a beef ban, they contrive to make cow slaughter all but impossible through the back door, by making it impossible to transport or sell cattle for slaughter. In the process, they have raised fundamental questions the government cannot escape, even as it tried to shift the focus to the misbehavior of a few young men who misguidedly slaughtered a calf in public as a form of protest. The first issue is constitutional. The decision to institute the full prohibition of cow slaughter is a prerogative of the states, not the government. At the center, entry 15 of the state list of the 7th schedule of the Constitution provides for the preservation, protection, and improvement of stock and prevention of animal diseases, veterinary training and practice, empowering the state legislatures to legislate the prevention of slaughter and preservation of cattle. Different states have different approaches to cow welfare. Some states like Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and Delhi have strict laws, while others such as Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Manipur, Mizoram and Nagaland have milder rules or no rules governing the welfare of cows. The blanket new rule is clearly an infringement on the rights of the states, undermining the federal rights guaranteed by our Constitution. The second objection is practical. The Constitution rightly speaks of milch and draft cattle. Cows produce milk for about 8 years, at which point they are too old for either milch or draft purposes. But they go on to live another 8 years. Farmers have to spend large sums of money on their food and fodder requirements and other maintenance costs of a cow, a fortune for agriculturalists who often live barely above subsistence level. This is why they sell non-lactating cows, normally for slaughter. Even our highest courts, despite their variety of views on the matter, have recognized that a total ban on cattle slaughter was not permissible if, under economic conditions, keeping useless bull or bullock be a burden on the society and therefore not in the public interest. India is already home to nearly 512 million cows, according to the 19th National Livestock Census 2012. Aside from maintaining them decently, India would also have to deal with deforestation and overgrazing, as well as the problems caused by abandoned cattle, who stray onto the streets and in many cases die of malnutrition in old age. The previous policy recognized that banning cow slaughter would impose an economic burden on farmers, who, given the paucity of resources at their disposal, would struggle to maintain these animals. As a result, India is or was the largest exporter of buffalo meat in the world, a multi-billion-dollar business. Since the sale and transfer of animals is integral to keep this going, the new rules are likely to severely cripple the meat export, dairy, leather, and other allied businesses, which provide employment for over 1 million individuals within the country, mainly from minority communities. The state of Maharashtra's 2015 beef ban had already destroyed the livelihoods of 1 million Muslim butchers and truckers in that state. A nationwide ban would push more people into poverty who are currently leading economically productive lives. Where beef was legally available, it was consumed not just by Muslims and other minorities, but also by a section of Hindus, as a vital source of protein for those who cannot afford other kinds of meat. Statistics suggest that just 2% of the Hindu population consume beef, but this 2% translates to 12.5 million individuals, making them the second largest consumers of beef in the country. And in reality many others do so who do not admit to the practice. Scheduled castes and tribes, SC/ST, comprise the overwhelming majority, more than 70%, of the beef-eating Hindu population, while 21% hail from the OBC community. The government decision is therefore socially discriminatory, since it specifically and disproportionately harms the poorer and less privileged sections of Indian society. But the real concern about the government's rules is not just about beef or the welfare of the cow, but about freedom. For most of India's existence, the default approach has essentially been live and let live, make your own choice about beef, and let others do the same. Like many Hindus, I have never considered it my business what others eat. Indians have generally felt free to be themselves, within our dynamic and diverse society. It is that freedom that the BJP's followers are challenging today. The Hindutva lobby, emboldened by the BJP's absolute majority, seek to impose their particular view of what India should be, regardless of whom it hurts. This is why the reaction has been so visceral, even from non-beef eaters like myself. Our resistance is to the way India is being changed into something it never was, an intolerant majoritarian society. The question of conversion, an issue that erupted in the past, has been simmering for a while and is waiting to explode, is the issue of conversions of Hindus to other faiths, notably Islam and Christianity. In the case of Islam, the issue has been complicated by allegations of love jihad, the alleged entrapment of unwary Hindu girls by Muslim men with the sole intent of conversion to their faith. In the case of Christianity, the existence of missionary societies with an avowed intent of harvesting souls for the Lord has created suspicion among Hindu groups. Some states have already outlawed conversions without the specific permission of the government, the use of inducements or threats to convert is already illegal across much of the country. Hindu leaders known for their liberality have tended to be less accommodative on the question of conversions. Swami Vivekananda memorably told his American listeners a century and a quarter ago, "Christian brethren of America, you are so fond of sending out missionaries to save the souls of heathens. I ask you, what have you done and are doing to save their bodies from starvation? In India, there are 300 million men and women living on an average of a little more than 50 cents a month. I have seen them living for years upon wildflowers. During the terrible famines, thousands died from hunger, but the missionaries did nothing. They come and offer life, but only on condition that the Hindus become Christians, abandoning the faith of their fathers and forefathers. Is it right? There are hundreds of asylums, but if the Muslims or the Hindus go there, they are kicked out. There are thousands of asylums erected by Hindus where anybody is received. There are hundreds of churches that have been erected with the assistance of the Hindus, but no Hindu temples for which a Christian has given a penny. To Vivekananda, it was a case of misplaced priorities. Brethren of America, you erect churches all through India, but the crying evil in the East is not religion, he declared. They have religion enough, but it is bread that the suffering millions of burning India cry out for with parched throats. What they want is bread, but they are given a stone. It is an insult to a starving people to offer them religion. It is an insult to a starving man to teach him metaphysics. Therefore, if you wish to illustrate the meaning of brotherhood, treat the Hindus more kindly, even though they are Hindus and are faithful to their religion. Send missionaries to them to teach them how better to earn a piece of bread and not to teach them metaphysical nonsense. And he recalled the non-proselytizing instincts of his own faith. Do I wish that the Christian would become Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or Buddhist would become Christian? God forbid. The Christian is not to become a Hindu or a Buddhist, nor a Hindu or a Buddhist to become a Christian. But each must assimilate the spirit of the others and yet preserve their individuality and grow according to their own law of growth. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi considered religious conversion harmful. He wrote, "If I had power and could legislate, I should certainly stop all proselytizing." In Hindu households, the advent of a missionary has meant the disruption of the family coming in the wake of change of dress, manners, language, food, and drink. At the same time, Hindus like me accept that every individual's spiritual needs are different, and if some wish to find salvation through another faith, that is surely their prerogative. Certainly, episodes of anti-missionary violence in Odisha and Gujarat some years ago do not speak well of those who perpetrated. A self-confident faith like Hinduism, secure in its own broad-minded liberality, has no need of gangster-like violence in its defense. When, at the time of such violence, specifically the brutal murder in 1999 of Australian missionary Graham Staines, and his two sons in Odisha, I wrote a column passionately denouncing it. I was gratified by the large number of readers, including several describing themselves as believing Hindus, who were as outraged as I was at the anti-Christian thuggery that had been perpetrated in the name of Hinduism. Killers of children have no right to claim the mantle of Hinduism, even if they insist they are acting on behalf of their faith. It is as simple as that. Murder does not have a religion even when it claims a religious excuse. Of course, it is easy enough to condemn anti-Christian violence because it is violence, and because it represents a threat to law and order as well as to that nebulous idea we call India's image. But an argument that several readers made needs to be faced squarely. In the words of one correspondent, could the violence be a reaction to provocations from those religions that believe that only their path is the right path and the rest of humanity are infidels? He went on to critique the aggressive strategy being pursued by some interests in the US to get people in India converted en masse to Christianity, not necessarily by fair means. In his view, aggressive evangelism directed against India by powerful church organizations in America enjoying enormous money power, has only one focused objective: to get India into the Christian fold, as they have succeeded, to a considerable extent, in South Korea and are now in the process of conquering Mongolia. Arguing that mass conversions of illiterates and semi-literates, and they also happen to be poor, extremely poor, is exploitative, he concluded. Powerful organizations from abroad with enormous money power indulging in mass conversion are a destabilizing factor provoking retaliation. Such concerns, which are widely shared, including by people in responsible positions in government, must be heeded, but at the same time I cannot accept any justification for the thugs' actions, nor am I prepared to see behind the violence an understandable Hindu resistance to Christian zealotry. Put simply, no nonviolent activity, however provocative, can ever legitimize violence. We must reject and denounce assaults and killings, whatever they may claim to be reacting to. Our democracy will not long survive if we condone people resorting to violence in pursuit of their ends, however genuine and heartfelt their grievances may be. The whole point about our system of governance is that it allows all Indians to resolve their concerns through legitimate means, including seeking legal redress or political change, but not violence. Staines himself had devoted his life to the care of leprosy patients. His widow continued this work after his murder, and was awarded a Padma Shri, a major national honor, by the previous government of India. But let us assume, for the purposes of argument, that Christian missionaries are indeed using a variety of inducements, development assistance, healthcare, education, sanitation, even chicanery, though there is only anecdotal evidence of missionary trickery, to win converts for their faith. So what? If a citizen of India feels that his faith has not helped him to find peace of mind and material fulfillment, why should he not have the option of trying a different item on the spiritual menu? Surely freedom of belief is any Indian's fundamental right under our democratic constitution, however ill-founded his belief might be. And if Hindu zealots suspect that his conversion was fraudulently obtained, why do they not offer counter-inducements rather than violence? Instead of destroying churches, perhaps a Hindu-financed sewage system or Pathshala, village school, might reopen the blinkered eyes of the credulous. Freedom of conscience is not a negotiable right. An India where an individual is not free to change his or her faith would be inconceivable. Some have been citing Gandhi's criticism of conversions, but his view was based on an eclectic, all-embracing view of religiousness that is a far cry from the narrow bigotry of those who today quote him in opposing conversions. Gandhi's point was that there was no need to convert from one religion to any other because all religions essentially believed the same thing. The fact is that many faiths do tend to see theirs as the only true path to salvation, and their religious leaders feel a duty to spread the light of a supposedly superior understanding of God to those less fortunate. As Gandhians or as rationalists we are free to decry their views, but the Indian Constitution gives each Indian the right to propagate his religion, and to challenge that right would, in the most fundamental sense, be unconstitutional. So let each religion do its thing, and let each Indian be free to choose. At the same time, let conversion be an issue of individual conscience and not mass delusion. I would have no difficulty in considering, in principle, the idea of a democratically elected legislature deciding that the constitutionally protected right to convert to another faith can only be exercised by an individual, rather than by an entire clan, tribe, or village. An end to ceremonies of mass conversion, often suspected to be achieved by inducements, might not be a bad thing. Let each individual who believes he or she has seen the light go through an individual act of conversion, one in which he or she must affirm that they know what they are giving up and what they are entering into. Of course, the debate is not merely a religious one, it is profoundly political. The devotees of Hindutva let me know in no uncertain terms what they thought of me when I expressed such views in 3 columns in the Times of India in September and October 2008. But I reject their presumption that they speak for all or even most Hindus. Hinduism, we are repeatedly told, is a tolerant faith. The central tenet of tolerance is that the tolerant society accepts that which it does not understand and even that which it does not like, so long as it is not sought to be imposed upon the unwilling. Of course, it is true that, while Hinduism as a faith might privilege tolerance, this does not necessarily mean that all Hindus behave tolerantly. But one cannot simultaneously extol the tolerance of Hinduism and attack Christian homes and places of worship. In one of those columns I argued that the premise behind much of the criticism of conversions is troubling because it seems to accord legitimacy to the argument that conversions are inherently anti-national. I made the point that India is founded on the rejection of the very idea that religion should be a determinant of nationhood, and cautioned that the distinction between Hindu nationalism and Indian nationalism could be all too easily blurred. Your Indianness has nothing to do with which god you choose to worship, or not. In any case, as we have discussed, Hinduism teaches Akam Sat Viprabhahadha Vadanti, the truth is one thing though the sages call it by different names. Why, then, are any of my co-religionists unhappy about some tribal Hindus becoming Christian? If a Hindu decides he wishes to be a Christian, how does it matter that he has found a different way of stretching his hands out towards God? Truth is one, the Hindu believes, but there are many ways of attaining it. As we have seen, Hinduism has never claimed a monopoly on spiritual wisdom. That is what has made it so attractive to seekers from around the world. Its eclecticism is its strength. So the rejection of other forms of worship, other ways of seeking the truth, is profoundly un-Hindu, as well as being un-Indian. Worse, the version of Indianness propagated by the opponents of conversion, the presumption that to be Hindu is more authentically Indian, and that to lapse from Hinduism is to dilute one's identification with the motherland, resembles nothing so much as the arguments for the creation of Pakistan, of which the nationalism of Gandhi, Nehru, and Azad is the fundamental repudiation. In many Muslim countries it is illegal for a Muslim to convert to any other faith. In some, such apostasy is even punishable by death. India has no room for such practices. There is no such thing as a Hindu heresy. Yet, ironically, it is the most chauvinist of the Hindutva brigade who seek to emulate this Muslim convention. They are therefore being untrue both to Hinduism and to Indian nationalism. The nationalist movement rejected the belief that religion was the most important element in shaping political identity. In India, our system recognizes the diversity of our people and guarantees that religious affiliation will be neither a handicap nor an advantage. By challenging that right, the advocates of Hindutva are undermining the very basis for Indian citizenship and the constitutional basis of the Indian state. To say that conversions are somehow inherently wrong would accord legitimacy to the rhetoric of the Bajrang Dal and its cohorts who declare openly that conversions from Hinduism to any other faith are anti-national. Implicit is the idea, as I've noted, that to be Hindu is somehow more natural, more authentically Indian, than to be anything else, and that to lapse from Hinduism is to dilute one's identification with the motherland. As a Hindu, I reject that notion utterly. To suggest that an Indian Hindu becoming Christian is an anti-national act not only insults the millions of patriotic Indians who trace their Christianity to more distant forebears, including the Kerala Christians whose families converted to the faith of St. Thomas centuries before the ancestors of many of today's Hindu chauvinists even learned to think of themselves as Hindu. It is an insult, too, to the national leaders, freedom fighters, educationists, scientists, military men, journalists, and sportsmen of the Christian faith who have brought so much glory to the country through their actions and sacrifices. It is, indeed, an insult to the very idea of India. Nothing could be more anti-national than that. One reader, Rayu Rajagopal, writing as a fellow Hindu, expressed himself trenchantly in describing terrorism and communal riots as two sides of the same coin, which systematically feed on each other. The only difference, he added, is that the first kind of terrorism is being unleashed by a fanatical few who swear no allegiance to the idea of India, whereas the second kind of terror is being unleashed by those who claim to love India more dearly than you and I, who are part of the electoral politics of India, and who know the exact consequences of their actions, creating deep fissures between communities, whose horrific consequences the world has witnessed once too often in recent decades. That is the real problem here. Nehru had warned that the communalism of the majority was especially dangerous because it could present itself as nationalist. Yet Hindu nationalism is not Indian nationalism. And it has nothing to do with genuine Hinduism either. A reader bearing a Christian name wrote to tell me that when his brother was getting married to a Hindu girl, the Hindu priest made a point of saying to him before the ceremony words to the effect of, "When I say God, I don't mean a particular God." As this reader commented, it's at moments like that that I can't help but feel proud to be Indian and to be moved by its religiosity even though I'm an atheist. The real alternatives in our country are between those who believe in an India where differences arising from your birth, language, social status, mode of worship or dietary preferences shouldn't determine your Indianness, and those who define Indianness along one or more of these divisions. In other words, the really important debate is not about conversions, but between the unifiers and the dividers, between those who think all Indians are us, whichever God they choose to worship, and those who think that Indians can be divided into us and them. It is time for all Hindus to say, "Stop the politics of division, we are all Indians." Part 3. Taking Back Hinduism.